Hi, I'm Chris Cunnane, Research Director for Supply Chain Management at ARC Advisory Group. Joining me today as part of our executive interview series is Chris Jones, Executive Vice President, Industry and Services at Descartes Systems Group. Chris, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Chris.
Now, I know we have a lot to cover today, but before we jump into it, and just in case there's anyone that is not familiar with Descartes, could you just give me a little bit of background, even about yourself, how you got into supply chain, and then about Descartes as a whole?
Well, I can tell you that I've been around supply chains long before the term even existed. I've worked in manufacturing. I've worked for logistics technologies companies, analyst firms that focused on this space. So I've kind of lived it for my entire career. And as far as Descartes goes, I think the best way to describe us is we're really all about supply chain logistics technology. Our customers really fall into two buckets. Either logistics is their business, or it's really important to their business. So think of manufacturers, retailers, distributors, or the carriers and logistics companies, 3PLs, freight forwarders, and so forth that really make up supply chains.
Thanks for the background there, Chris. So I guess, to kick things off, why is there so much interest in sustainability and home delivery right now?
Well, I think it starts with who's really the driver of this, and that's consumers and their interest in it. And for the last 2 years, we've been doing a benchmark study on sustainability. It's really around consumer sentiment. And what we were trying to gauge was what was consumers' interest. And obviously, by doing it over multiple years, you can start to see the trends there. And what we're seeing is that just about half of consumers are really looking for retailers to have sustainable delivery options. But just in general, they want to have and help the environment, right? So this is really the essence of it.
Now, do you see consumers increasing online buying to have it delivered to their home?
Yes, absolutely. We looked at it in this study from just to keep it simple from 3 different angles. Buy it online, go pick up it in store, buy it online, go get it at a locker somewhere, click and collect, if you will, or buy online and get it delivered. That is the last one is the top choice, and we also ask why. And convenience is really the #1 driver for this. And if you will, the last couple of years got people to buy more things online, and I'll describe it as they recognize that, oh, there's a lot of things I can buy online. And once I've done it, I really like this whole notion of I don't have to do anything to get it to my home.
Well, are consumers more or less interested in sustainable home delivery?
They're more interested. This is up as well. A couple things I would say is, one, they want to know what options do you have for it. They will buy more from retailers and, if you will, and companies in general who have demonstrated a strong sustainability ethic, maybe even differentiated sustainability services. So the interest is there. And they, and particularly, and I'll just say this, and you can imagine, no surprise, age makes a huge difference. Older people less so, younger folks incredibly so. So if you're looking at I'll call it the current and future of this, we think it's just going to continue to rise.
So I've seen, over the course of the last couple of years, going to conferences, talking with a lot of companies. There's a focus on sustainability, but at the same time, oftentimes they don't know what sustainability means in terms of how do we actually make things sustainable. So what types of sustainable, delivery options are getting the consumer's attention right now?
There's a couple that are really simple, and then there's some others that I'll describe as have a little more sophistication, but they all really hit the consumer's desire. So let me break them up into really, I'll call it methods. All right. So things like combining deliveries on a single day. If you're somebody who buys from an Amazon or a Walmart or whatever, and you buying during the week, traditionally you get things delivered as they are, basically purchased. Now with things like Amazon Prime Day, right? It's around, hey, let's make this the Thursday, right? Every Thursday, whatever you bought during the week, we'll bring it all in one point. And they make that as a convenience story, but it is really a sustainability story, because if you bought 3 things, you'd have 3 deliveries. Now all of a sudden you have 1 delivery, right? So that's where we see, that kind of approach, and there's other options as well, what we would call eco-friendly deliveries, and that's really, and I'll explain what that is, but that gets to the second thing, that consumers want to know of the options they have, what's the most sustainable ones for them. So what we saw was, and we started this actually years ago in Europe, where it's there's more of an ethic around the environment than there has been in the U.S. Is that consumers want to know, for instance, if you give them 5 delivery options, which of those options are the ones that really result in less carbon footprint. So between having methods, okay, and being able to tell people which of those options are, they're very, very interested in having it and making choices around that. And about half of them really would like to do this, if not every delivery, as many as they could.
So I guess there's, a couple ways to look at it when it comes to sustainability, of what the consumers want, what the retailers want, and how, all of that works together. So I guess the big question is, what do consumers think of retailer sustainability delivery performance, and how are they acting when they're disappointed with what the retailers are doing?
Well, this is where I think I call it the other edge of the sword. When you talk with consumers, there's interest on one side, and then, if you will, then there's action on the other. And what we also saw in the study was about, on average, about 25% of them were looking at making decisions that they'd walk away essentially from that retailer, or they would tell their friends and family not to use that retailer, or the thing that should scare most retailers, or they're willing to post it online. All right, which has a multiplying effect in that. So there's a lot less tolerance. And again, by age, there's such a huge spectrum of results. And so, not surprisingly, younger buyers are much less tolerant and much more willing to act.
So, I mean, you mentioned age there, and sort of that social acceptance side of things. And you may not have any numbers to back this up, but have you seen anything around, net promoter score and how it correlates to sustainability? Is that something that retailers are thinking about, or does sustainability not factor into net promoter scores?
We didn't do anything like that for this research. I do think it plays into it. It gets into, maybe I'm going to digress for a second, Chris, because it does get into a bigger story here, which is, retailers need to look at this at the opportunity that it presents. So to me, being able to boost your NPS by being more sustainable is one of the things you should be really looking at, obviously, as a retailer. But the other thing I would tell you, and this was probably the most aha part of this study, was the options that consumers want. So think of this as 50% of consumers that want these options. Every one of them, with the exception of carbon neutral shipping, would directly result in lower delivery costs for the retailer. Now, I'm not saying carbon neutral shipping wouldn't necessarily, but the others are things like I mentioned: consolidate deliveries, present eco-friendly delivery options. And an eco-friendly delivery option really is something that, if you do it the way we do it, it's basically, hey, we're going to be next door tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. Wouldn't it be great if you helped the environment and took that 11 o'clock appointment, right? That just means your travel distance went from maybe miles to feet, right? And guess what? Your carbon footprint went down, and your cost went down. Your delivery density and productivity went up. So for what we think is that retailers need to just like flip this on their head in terms of like the whole notion that it's another challenge from from consumers. It's going to cost more money to do it, and I may or may not result in a happier consumer, because, like I said, we didn't do NPS, but everything else we did around here was said that consumer acceptance and willingness to do more with that retailer was pretty evident.
That's great. And yeah, I think from my standpoint of everything I've seen, everyone I've talked to is, sustainability and supply chain it's a symbiotic relationship with profitability. So I think that's sort of the baseline that, companies can start at. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today, sharing your insights on sustainability and home delivery.
Well, Chris, thank you for having me.
All right, my guest today was Chris Jones, Executive Vice President, Industry and Services at Descartes Systems Group. Thank you for watching.